So this is going to be my first ever mid-year freak out book tag. I saw this all last year when I first kind of started rereading, getting back into it, and obviously I missed it because I hadn't read anything, so I didn't have anything to recap for the first part of half of the year. But now we are in July, so we definitely had a good 6 months of the year. I have definitely had some reading slumps this year, but I'm just going to do this tag. I've definitely been waiting to do it. I've been wanting to do it, and I see it all over the place. So now is the time for me to do this. So we're just going to go straight in. The best book that I have read so far this year. There are a few of them. There definitely are, and it's kind of unfair for me to pick one, but I have narrowed it down to one. And it is The Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. Is this the best book ever written? No, absolutely not. Is it probably the most original book ever written? No, probably not. But I read this at a time when I kind of needed it. I read it actually recently and I gave it 5 stars. There was something about it where it just spoke to me. It was just so moving. It's about this woman who is basically just trying to find a home, where she belongs. That's the underlining theme of this story. But obviously you have a spooky house, you have the supernatural, you have a guy in here. There's a lot of other elements in this book. I did do a reading vlog reading this book, and I spoke about how much I loved it in that. So you can absolutely check that out. But I feel like this was the best book that I've read so far this year because it's the one that moved me the most. Or one of the ones. There's another one that came very, very close to me speaking about, but I'm already talking about it in some other tags in the list, and I just didn't want to talk about it to a crazy amount. So yeah, Starling House, Alex E. Harrow, definitely one of, if not the best book that I read so far this year, just because it really, really moved me, and I love the writing as well. I thought the writing of this was really, really beautiful. Okay, next up is best sequel that you've read so far this year. I've hardly read any sequels. I'm not a big, huge, fantasy reader. I'm dabbling, I'm getting into it, but the ones that I am reading are more of the romantasy, the Sarah J. Maas's and everything. And I did read a lot of the Throne of Glass series at the beginning of this year. I finished that series, but I wouldn't call them sequels in my opinion. So the actual true sequel that I've read, and I did give it a 5-star, is Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands. Now this one, I don't feel like is as good as the first book. I gave the first book 5 stars. I know a lot of people don't enjoy these books and they find them really boring and tedious. For me, I find them very, very cute, and there is something about the way that they're written that I really, really enjoy. I feel like with this one, it was more of a 4.5 star as opposed to a 5, but I did round it up. Definitely by far the best sequel that I've read, but there are no other contenders, so by default, it is the best sequel that I've read. If I read any more throughout the rest of the year, maybe I will have a different opinion about it. But I thought this was cute, and it was a good filler book because obviously there's a 3rd book coming out. I think this was definitely more of a filler, and then we'll get into the 3rd book where it's going to be a little bit more interesting and we'll see more of the Fae world. So anyway, I liked it still. It just wasn't as good. Okay, new release that I haven't yet read would be A Funny Story by Emily Henry. I don't feel like I've seen a lot of people rave about it. Obviously for me, I'm very interested in reading more from her. I really enjoyed Book Lovers, but I haven't read anything else from the author. So I'm a little bit worried that Book Lovers is just a standalone, and then the rest I might not enjoy because I've had really tough experiences with some romance books. I just find them so cringy most of the time, and Book Lovers wasn't. So yeah, Funny Story came out in April this year, and I was gonna order it and pre-order it and get it, but I think I'm gonna wait for the paperback just because I just don't really need a hardback of a romance novel. I just don't feel like it's the same vibe. So I might just wait, but that's one that obviously has released and I want to read it. I just haven't read it yet. Okay, so the next one is a most anticipated release. I really want to read the sequel to House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. So the sequel is called Somewhere Beyond the Sea. I generally loved House on the Cerulean Sea, and I'll speak about it in some other tags. and I definitely would love to read the sequel of that one. So potentially that could be actually the best sequel that I read this year, if it's better than Map of Other Lands from Heather Fawcett. So we'll see. But that one I think is the only one. I mean, I'm not very good with seeing what's going to be released this year. I don't really follow that. If I see a book, then I'm interested in it. But at the moment, I'm really trying to not buy any books, and I'm really trying to read what's on my shelves, which is doing fine. You know, I have a lot of books that I have yet to read, and they're all behind me. So I'm trying not to just keep buying and buying and buying, and I haven't bought any books since January, and I'm very, very happy with that. And I think it's really helped me rediscover what I like, because I have so many books on my shelves and I have no idea if I like them or not, and now I'm figuring out if I do. So I'm not really looking at new releases all that much, but that's definitely a book that I would like to pick up once I can, which I think is very, very soon. All right, biggest disappointment. I think biggest disappointment has been really hard for me to choose, simply because my expectations aren't super high on a lot of books that I read. I generally have just gone in to it expecting the worst, and you know, if they surprise me, that's great. Otherwise, I feel like I'm usually going into a book expecting it not to be good. So my expectation is pretty low. So my disappointment is not super, super high most of the time. However, there is one book that kind of came to mind just simply because I thought it was going to be good and I really, really didn't like it. And it is this one, A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. Now, I have seen a lot of people like this book, and I just don't understand why. I thought it was so poorly written, so rushed, and also had tons of info dumping as well. So it had so many issues with just the general flow of the actual story itself. And then the story itself was so bad. I just feel like they tried to add romance where possible. They tried to add, obviously, the heist where possible. There was hardly any vampire at all. And it's basically, you know, I thought I was going to read about a tea room for vampires. Like, that's how it starts off. I thought, well, this is really going to be like so cool, you know, and yeah, it's YA, but I still felt like it was going to have some aspect of, you know, some like something to hold on to. And it was just so bland. And I just, yeah, for the reasons I've just said, I just felt like it was rushed, had too much in it, but also didn't flow. And it was a disappointment because I was anticipating to like this, and I wanted to read it, and then I got it in, I think this is a Lumicrate. No, this is Fairy Loot. I got it in Fairy Loot, and I didn't realize that we were going to get it in Fairy Loot, so I was like, oh, this is great, because now I don't need to buy it. And I read it, I think, literally the week I received it, and it was a disappointment. So I think, yeah, this is the biggest disappointment. I mean, I've read some really, really bad books that I've had to DNF this year, or just give 1 or 2 stars. But I think they were also not huge disappointments because I wasn't expecting them to be amazing. This one, I was really hoping it'd be at least a 4-star, and I think I gave it a 2. And that was being generous. So yeah, I would say biggest disappointment. But again, it wasn't like super, super high. But, you know, with everything else that I've been reading, it was a disappointment. Okay, the biggest surprise, and this is the book I feel like no one is talking about, and I thought this book was so good. And it is The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker. I gave this 5 stars. I couldn't put it down. It's so interesting. It's so morbid. It's about bringing back the dead, but like it's gruesome, and there's like monsters in here. You know, and there's a love interest type thing, and then a friendship as well, and a trial. And I don't know, I thought it had so much in it, and it was really fun to read. But I loved how, even though it's YA, it didn't hold back on the gory details and like blood and like the undead and all that stuff. Like, I generally really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the descriptions of everything and the world it was set in. I don't see anyone talking about this book. And I can't remember who her name was. I saw someone almost DNF this without even reading it from her shelves. And I was like, what are you doing? Read that book. It's so good. So I don't know, maybe I'm the minority. I mean, maybe it's just for me. It's a book that I really enjoyed and no one else is enjoying. But it was such a surprise to me because I went into it completely blind. It's one of these other ones. It's a Fairy Loot. book. So I went into it not knowing really anything other than just reading the blurb as I got it. I didn't even know of this book. And there will be a sequel. I really want to read the sequel. I think it's not out until next year. So it's obviously not an anticipated release for this year. But definitely, I want people to read this book. I think it's good. If you want to believe me, I actually really, really found it really fun. And it wasn't too YA, so that was enjoyable for me too. Okay, so new favorite author is the next tag question. And honestly, this one would be pretty impossible for me to say because I feel like you have to read at least 2 books from an author to know if they're going to be one that's either a one-hit wonder or if they actually are going to be releasing books that you enjoy. So this is generally just a guess because I don't know. I could pick Alex E. Harrow for The Starling House, but I wanted to pick something different and talk about a different book. So I've picked Bunny. So my new favorite author is going to be Mona Awad. Now, have I read anything else from her? Absolutely not. So I don't actually know if this is going to be the truth. But I recently read Bunny, gave it 5-star. Potentially, it could have been one of the favorite books that I read this year. There were, I feel like there were moments when I was reading the book and I was getting annoyed, but it wasn't like it was written badly or anything. It was just I was getting annoyed with some of the characters, but it was kind of purposeful. So I wouldn't say it's like my favorite book of the year. So I think, it kind of sits where it belongs. This is within the 5 stars that I've read. Really unhinged, absolutely crazy story, crazy gory horror, but funny. And also there is this aspect of loneliness and finding your home. Again, this underlining theme that I generally seem to enjoy, and a sadness, and like there's twists in here. And this is such a fun book, but I can see why people hate it. So I'm very, very curious to see the other books. I have already added them to my basket, but again, like I'm saying, I'm not really buying books, so I'm going to wait a little bit, but I definitely want to read more from this author just to see if it's the same kind of structure, the same sort of, because I would say the language in this book is written beautifully. Like I feel like Starling House, the language, like it was written beautifully. Like I just from page 1, I knew I was going to love that book. The language, you couldn't say it's beautifully written, but the story itself is so unhinged and so crazy. It really, really intrigues me what this author has written in other books and what she will bring out also in the future. So definitely an interesting new favorite author of mine. But again, a lot of these could be really good books, and then there are other books that I read from them, like even Emily Henry. I've only read 1 book from her. I might hate her other books, and there's so many of them, so it's hard for me to pick one. I mean, this is my first year doing this tag, so maybe as I keep going I will have more opportunity to read from these other authors. But yeah, I think Mona Awad is very interesting. I'm very curious to read her other work. Okay, so the next one is New Fictional Crush. And this one's a little bit embarrassing because if you've read the book, then maybe you feel the same way. I mean, I'm supposed to crush on him, but it's also kind of weird. So I recently read Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and I'm very interested in reading the sequel. I think also the 3rd book is coming out soon as well. The sequel's already out. And this is another YA. It's a romance with some sort of darkness to it, but no, it's not a dark romance. It's just basically you crush on death. I mean, the Grim Reaper is haunting her whole life, and then you kind of end up falling in love with him. So I'm crushing on the Grim Reaper in this book. It is so stupid. So yeah, it's one of those where, are you okay, Gabby? I mean, are you sure you're crushing on this guy? And yeah, I am. I'm crushing on the Grim Reaper in this book. So yeah, he is my new favorite crush for the year. Because I was thinking, I read all of the Throne of Glass series. I didn't really have crushes on any of those guys. I actually just started reading House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas as well. Not crushing on anyone on there. And I've read some other romantic-y books this year, or other books that have crushes. Like I could basically pick Wendell, right, from Emily's Encyclopedia, A Map of the Other Worlds, you know, like by Heather Fawcett, I could pick Wendell character because I was crushing hard on him too. But I think ultimately I'm crushing more on Death in this book, which is kind of a weird thing to say. So yeah, if you haven't read this book, it's kind of fun. I mean, I spoke about it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I mean, it's a fun book. It's got so much in it, but I am intrigued to see what happens in the next book. So the next tag is new favorite character. I actually don't have anything for this because I just don't have a new favorite character. So I'm just gonna have to just skim over this tag for the time being. Okay, so this next book actually is for the next two tags. So the book that made you cry and the book that made you happy, and they happen to be the same book. And I have already kind of mentioned this book, but it is The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I took the longest time to read this book. I kind of read the first third of the book thinking, oh, it's a bit slow. I was kind of sluggish. I was in a kind of a reading slump, so it was really hard for me to get through that part. And then once I really like got into it, this is such a sweet, sweet book. And I fell in love with the characters in this book. Actually, for the previous tag, like your favorite character, or like the newest character that you found, I feel like Talia, the female gnome in this book, was so lovely and adorable. And I loved her little comments because she was quite morbid in a way, but in a sweet way. Anyway, I loved this book. It did make me cry, and it also made me happy at the end. I know that a lot of people say this book is problematic. I've read why it's problematic, but I think for me, ultimately, the book made me feel a certain way when I read it, and that was lovely. So regardless of the problematic things that people say, which I don't agree or disagree with, I just kind of am floating in the middle because I'm, you know, I can understand kind of why people might say things about this book and the inspiration that T.J. Klune took from and everything. I can see the issues that lie behind that, absolutely. But it didn't take away from the fact that I really just love the story of this book, and it made me feel something. And the whole reason of me coming back to books after 10 plus years of not really reading very much at all is because I wanted to find books that made me feel something and make me feel a certain way, whether that is make me cry, make me happy, make me sad. I didn't cry in a sad way. I cried in a way that, again, this is ultimately about someone finding their home and finding a place that they belong to. And I have realized like my 3 favorite books so far this year have all had that underlining metaphor and theme. And I'm thinking, gosh, well, what does that say about me? I mean, am I longing for this home? And like, it must be something to do with that. So I love this book. So definitely a book that made me cry in a good way, in a happy way. And yeah, a book that made me happy. So next one I'm going to skip as well because it is a book to movie adaptation, and I haven't read anything so far this year that would qualify for that. I mean, I guess you could say One Day. They came out with the TV show. I didn't watch the TV show. I watched the movie years ago. I've read One Day years ago, but I didn't read it this year, and I didn't rewatch the movie this year. So yeah, there's nothing else that I can think of that would qualify for this. So we're just going to skip. And then the next one is Most Beautiful Book. And I have to say, I have received some really beautiful, gorgeous books from Fairy Loot and Illumicrate. And yeah, there's a few up there, but I feel like this one, for me personally, is the most beautiful book. And it is The Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan. This is an Illumicrate edition. I just think the colorings is absolutely just stunning. I love it. I love the artwork. And then if you actually look at the book itself is truly a work of art, and it's completely different to the front. Like the level of detail that you get from this is astonishing to me for this book. I have not read this book yet, but it is so beautiful, and I'm really hoping that it's a good book. I mean, gosh, you know, yeah, it's a great book. We all get beautiful books. Even like inside is pretty decent. I mean, I'm not as enamored by the these pages inside, but it's a gorgeous book. And I love that it's so different inside versus the dust jacket. The dust jacket obviously is a little bit more, I don't even know what kind of style that is, but it's a little bit more in a way like a cartoony style, and then you have the level of detail in the actual book. So I think this is probably the most beautiful book that I own at the moment. I'm hoping it's a good book. Don't know. Haven't got to it yet, but yeah, definitely feel like, I mean, I love blush and like oranges as well. So for me, it's beautiful. So anyway, all right. And then books that I really want to read the rest of the year. I just want to continue reading through my TBR. I want to continue reading a lot of my hardbacks as well that I received from Fairy Loot and Illumicrate. You know, just try to get through those because obviously I get them every month. So I just want to sort of whittle them down as I read them. But there are some books also that I kind of want to get to because I feel like I think I do like horror, but I like horror in the way that it's eerie or different. And I don't have too many horror books on my shelves, but I do want to get to these books maybe come September, October time, just in time for like the spooky season. And this is a book that I tried reading last year, but I think I was just kind of over like the horror at the time. And I ended up soft DNFing it after only reading like 30 pages or something. And it is Hex by Thomas Oldhubolt. And I have read Echo, and I gave Echo 4 stars. It was a really, really hard book to read. I'm going to be honest with you. But ultimately, I was just thinking about it the other day because I watched somebody climb Mount Everest on YouTube, and it's all about mountain, climbing mountains and everything, and in the snow. And it just, watching that YouTube video just like reminded me of that book. And then I was thinking, well, you know, that it was a good book. It is a good book. And this obviously is the same author. So and this is one that's a little bit more highly reviewed than as opposed to Echo. So hopefully this one should be good. It just starts off a little weird, and I don't think I was expecting it, but maybe I just need to get back into it because I wasn't in the mood for it at the time. And there was nothing ever wrong with it. I just couldn't get into it. So I'm hoping that I can finish this. Then I have a couple more that are on my shelves, and I don't know if I'm going to like them or not, but they are more on like the spooky side. So I definitely want to get to them this year. But the first one is called The Nesting by C.J. Cook. And this one, I couldn't tell you what it's about. I think it's based on it's based on a Norwegian folk lore. So, you know, like a Norwegian myth. I don't know. I think it starts with a murder or something, and the woods, and it's creepy. It's got all those creepy vibes that I feel like I'm going to enjoy this winter. And then I also want to read The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. Again, I couldn't tell you what this is. I think it's a haunting, and that's kind of all I know. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of hoping just to get back into a little bit more of the horror books during like the time. So like come, you know, end of August, beginning of September, I'm going to try to start reading some horror books. But yeah, otherwise, I don't really have a list of books that I need to read this year. It's just, I want to keep reading the books that I own, and I hopefully will enjoy them. So anyway, that is my first mid-year book tag. Hopefully it went well, it went decent. Have you read any of these books? Just based on like what you've seen that I like, can you recommend me any books? That would be great to know. For anyone who hasn't subscribed, if you are watching this, please go ahead and subscribe. I am going to try to figure out some kind of timetable, some kind of calendar or schedule in terms of how to post. You know, I don't read a book a day. I don't read a book every 2 days. I read, just naturally. And if I read a book in 2 days, it's because I genuinely wanted to. And if I take a week to read a book, it's just because that's how it's gone. And so it's hard to film book videos all the time, because if you haven't read anything, there's really nothing to talk about. So I'm going to try to figure out a schedule for this channel, because I want to keep at it. I am still reading, so it'd be nice to keep going. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, just please like and subscribe. That would really be wonderful. It mean a lot to me, and I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.